Western classical performances generally follow the composer's score to the letter. Historically, however, music making and learning in Europe from the Middle Ages to the 18th and early 19th centuries relied heavily on memorized formulas and improvisation. For instance, in the 19th century, it was common to conclude a concert with an improvisation on themes suggested by the audience. What skills were required of musicians that enabled them to produce these improvisations? And how might music theory help us reimagine these spontaneous performances through research and music making? Today, we know Carl Czerny's name from his piano finger exercises, but he was also a prolific composer, author, and teacher who studied with Beethoven and taught Liszt. Czerny's systematic introduction to improvisation is a uniquely detailed source that documents improvisation in the period. Czerny surveys several genres of improvisation. He discusses how to improvise preludes or introductions to pre-composed works, how to play fantasies on audience suggestions, and how to elaborate on popular operatic tunes in a lighter improvisation, among other things. In addition to providing instructions for improvisation, Czerny's treatise includes notated examples of spontaneous music making. These examples provide crucial evidence about what spontaneous improvisations might have sounded like. Chapter 4 of the treatise deals with improvising a fantasy on a single theme. In it, Czerny shows how to take a theme and transform it into various tempos and styles. Other contemporary sources by well-known composer-improvisers of the time echo Czerny's notions. They explain that improvisers must immediately recognize a theme's potential for development, and that they should explore such potentials patiently while practicing improvisation. Let's listen to the theme that Czerny develops in his examples, imagining that it was just suggested by an audience member. Here's Czerny's version as an allegro. Czerny answers the open harmonic implication of the hypothetical audience suggestion and reaches harmonic closure. Czerny then transforms this theme as though he were an improviser playing an adagio. This is a vivid demonstration of the types of thematic transformation that would have happened in real time. The theme is recast in the major mode rather than the stormy original minor. The dramatic octave descent is replaced by a mere repetition of the tonic note. The rhythms are changed, and the melodic approaches to the harmonic question and answer have an altered contour. Yet within an improvised fantasy based on a single theme, the constant repetition of the melodic idea makes it recognizable to the audience. Moreover, from the improviser's perspective, the theme serves as a connective thread for music making. Czerny did not expect pianists to improvise fantasies out of thin air. He provided a list of written-out fantasies as models for what one might aspire to in live playing. He also encouraged students to study compositions that involve elaborate reworking of motifs, like Beethoven's 5th and 7th symphonies. These too could serve as useful exemplars for improvisation. We tend to think about motivic transformation as a compositional technique, but Czerny's discussion reminds us that this was also done in live improvisation. Thus, one indispensable skill for improvisers was to imagine how a musical idea might be developed, and to realize this potential on the fly, as we saw in Czerny's transformation of a hypothetical suggestion. But this was just a fragment, not a fully worked-out improvisation. What might a large-scale fantasy have sounded like? Thankfully, Czerny provides fully notated fantasies, including one based on a similar idea. Here's the theme for improvisation for Czerny's written-out fantasy. Like the previous one, this is a quick succession of brief gestures and silences and a question-and-answer harmonic interplay. Czerny explores this theme in the context of a minor mode sonata exposition, which modulates to the relative major key. Here's how this melodic idea is transformed at the outset of the transition from the home key to the exposition's secondary key. And here's the transformation of the idea into a second theme of the sonata's exposition, inverting its contour. Inspired by Czerny's instructions on motivic transformation and by his written-out fantasies, I composed a fantasy based on the theme that we heard previously in two of its transformations. Though my piece is a composition, not an improvisation, I have followed Czerny's written-out improvisation closely. As Czerny did in his written-out fantasy, I answered the opening harmonic question, created a transition based on the given motif, and transformed it into a gentler secondary theme. The type of improvisation represented here is a kind of sonata-fantasy hybrid that resembles well-known composed works like Schubert's Wanderer Fantasy and Liszt's B minor piano sonata. At the same time, Czerny's written-out fantasies seem more jumbled and less architectonic. They are more like realistic improvisations caught in notation than stylized, composed fantasy sonatas like Schubert's Fantasy. Composed sonata movements involve repetition that is easier to accomplish without the real-time constraints of an improvisation. After the middle development section, the recapitulation repeats major chunks of the exposition that had been played before. This is difficult to do in improvising, since it entails going back to materials at a distance of several minutes of live performance. In fact, Czerny comments on the difficulty of including repetitions in improvisation due to memory constraints. In his written-out improvisations, Czerny mitigates these difficulties by simply breaking off after the exposition and development, eliminating the need to recapitulate any material from memory. Schubert uses the same strategy in his Wanderer Fantasy. These large-scale formal considerations have guided me in the reconstructed fantasy, as you can hear in its performance by Bang-Shyuan Chen. This video has reflected on some paths to reimagining historical improvisation. This scholarly and practical pursuit explores synergies between historical documents and music making in the present day. With Czerny's manual, we have a contemporary source possibly reflecting what a live improvisation sounded like. My reimagined fantasy is a 21st century realization of latent potentials in Czerny's pedagogical fragment. This is also an opportunity to reimagine a past musical tradition that involved more improvisation in comparison with today's Western classical concert halls.